Brexit is over, but how are both sides doing? Some say good. The others, the big end is yet to come, and truck drivers mourn loaves of bread. It was in the final phase of the negotiations in mid-December when the schism broke out again. While opponents of Brexit predicted chaos from January 1st, Prime Minister Boris Johnson assured that Britain, with or without a deal, would prosper powerfully. In the meantime, the mood has largely calmed down. Trucks were jammed on the border with France, but that was before the turn of the year and had to do with the Christmas business and new corona measures. Since the British left the EU internal market and the customs union, border traffic has been fairly undisturbed. Some experts warn that the consequences of Brexit could become more visible in the coming weeks and months. There are always reports of gaps on supermarket shelves in Northern Ireland, and customers in London are just waiting for one or the other exotic fruit. Delivery delays could escalate when orders pick up again and warehouses are empty. In Northern Ireland, there is also concern about the end of the 3-month grace period when goods traffic with Great Britain will be subject to full controls. Even when trading in the other direction, there is a crunch in some places. Scottish fishermen interrupted exports to the EU because the new regulations slowed down deliveries to such an extent that the goods would have arrived in a rotten state. The first curiosities have also been reported. For example, Dutch border guards recently stopped British truck drivers and confiscated their sandwiches. Animal products, including sausage and cheese, are no longer allowed to be imported by private individuals. The Bank of England estimates that the Brexit deal could cost gross domestic product 2 percentage points in the coming years. This is mainly due to the new bureaucracy. It remains questionable whether such losses will cause Brexit supporters to ponder. On the one hand, they point out that a large part of the current problems have to do with the corona pandemic. On the other hand, they offset current disadvantages against later advantages that they hope to gain from free trade agreements with non-EU countries. How undramatic the British perceived the first few weeks as a sovereign nation can be seen in the public debate about the consequences of Brexit. It hardly took place. Opposition leader Keir Starmer even moved away from his announcement that parts of the agreement would be renegotiated in the event of an election victory. Like it or not, this is the treaty that the Labour government will inherit and that it has to work with, said the Labour leader, who had approved the agreement together with his group in Parliament. The consequences for the labour market could be more serious than possible trade losses. Since January, EU citizens who do not live in the UK can only work there with a permit. At the same time, the residence status of EU citizens who have moved to the kingdom in recent years and can therefore only apply for pre-settled status is more precarious than before. This unsettles many employers. Conversely, the new regulations also affect British people who want to work in the EU. There was almost an outcry from the British music industry. Musicians who want to give concerts on the continent, like tourists or writers, cannot simply enter and stay for 3 months. You need to apply for work visa. While the Musicians Association ISM expressed itself horrified and demanded quick improvements, the Labour Party noted grimly that the fans would never forgive the government for this. The question of guilt has not yet been clarified. Cabinet Secretary of State Lord True recently stated in the House of Lords that the musicians owed the exemption to the EU because they had rejected a generous offer from the British during the negotiations. In Brussels, however, it is said that the British are to blame. Grumbling about changes and difficulties in adapting is mixed with satisfaction about the new freedom. Many Britons are critical of the European Union's efforts to fight the pandemic together. The COVID crisis has demonstrated the importance of the nation state and the limitations of the EU, even found The Guardian, which in recent years had written against Brexit like no other newspaper. Brussels has been slow in ordering vaccines and approving them, the newspaper argued. In addition, the EU struggled for months for its financial aid package, while the British government was able to react quickly and in a coordinated manner. It remains to be seen whether the promises of the Brexit supporters will come true and whether the independence of Brussels will translate into a lasting advantage. But those two examples from The Guardian are not doing it. Many bring up the difference between Israel and the EU, for example. There's a big difference in approach. The EU hasn't gambled with what kinds of vaccines. They ordered from all possible producers who they believed will come up with a working vaccine. Israel is now far ahead of the EU, but they were lucky. And you have to know this because it was a kind of a gamble. They put all on one card and they were lucky, and so this card played. But that's the decision of each state itself. The Israeli state wanted to do this, they did this and were successful. Congratulations. But the EU was more careful and wanted to have a lot of cards on the table for the security of the people. So, sovereign decision from both sides. I don't say one is better than the other, but that's a totally different approach, and you can't just compare them. It could have gone completely different in Israel if they booked just from a company that still isn't finished. So think about this polarization in the discussions. And the other thing is the financial aid package. Yeah, it had to be done with a budget. But all the Brexiteers in my comments who talked about the EU budget always said that we right now still wouldn't have a budget. And we have this months ago, and all 27 EU members agreed to it, as they had to, because it has to be a unanimous decision. And they made that decision. So, what? It works. Foreign policy could become a touchstone. Johnson never tires of celebrating the end of EU membership as the beginning of a global Britain, a country that spreads its values around the world and continues its tradition as a great sea power. The past year, political membership ended in February, as you hopefully know, was used by the government to set its own above all human rights policy, and it set its accents abroad. It tightened its sanctions regime and took measures against Russian and Burmese civil servants. At the same time, they messed with the leadership in Beijing. It restricted Huawei's market access and wants to punish companies that benefit from the labor camp in Xinjiang province. The government also counts among its moral obligations to offer residents of the former Crown Colony of Hong Kong to reside permanently in the kingdom if they feel oppressed by Beijing. However, stronger reactions do not automatically translate into more political weight. Many foreign policy experts believe that the influence of a UK that is no longer part of the EU will tend to decline. In London, people are watching very closely who the new American president will choose as his first European contact. Joe Biden is a declared opponent of Brexit and could give preference to Angela Merkel or Emmanuel Macron. On the other hand, he knows how deeply that would affect the British and the special relations they always talk about. In a study by the independent think tank Chatham House earlier this week, the British government was advised to step off the imperial steed. Britain will fail if it tries to reincarnate as an independent, influential miniature great power, wrote the think tank director Robin Niblett. Instead, it should rely on its soft power and its diplomatic network and concentrate on enabling positive international results. The new year offers good conditions for that. The British will not only host the G7 meeting in June, but also the next climate summit called COP26 in November. For months, Johnson has been presenting his country as a pioneer in climate protection. An international breakthrough under British direction would not only gain prestige for post-Brexit Britain, but also build a bridge to Washington, where climate policy will soon be very popular again. John Kerry, Biden's climate protection man, had Johnson conveyed. If you want to have a relationship with him, take COP seriously and put a heavy weight on it. And if you want to stay informed, please subscribe to my channel and my other channels. I'll see you in my next video. Auf Wiedersehen.